Welcome to this Facebook Live. I'm really excited today to have my special guest on here who we're going to dive in deep into a lot of things that are happening right now. Just to let you know, if you guys aren't part of this, that this is originally broadcast in the Facebook group called Unity. And what I did was I created this because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear stuff on the main feed in Facebook. I felt there was a need to have a space where there's more calm, more peace, something nourishing, something healing. And so that's why it's totally free. But it's a place where we leave the fear behind for a little bit, the anxiety behind, to get nourished. And I'm Ravi Tangri, and my guest today, I am absolutely delighted to have Deborah Young, who is a Karmic Astrologer. And we've been having some interesting chats lately about all the things that have been happening. Deborah I've heard about her for years and years. I believe she's booked 3 years out with clients, and so somehow we just connected last year on Facebook and then met for a coffee and a chat, and it was fascinating. And then all the world changed after that with all of this stuff, and we've continued having some chats on Messenger and such. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, these are certainly interesting times, and I know there's what I'd like to ask is people who are tuning in, just jot in the comments. I can see them there, where you're coming in from, and if you've got questions as we go along, put them into the comments wherever you're watching this, and we can bring that into the conversation. We can respond to them. So, Deborah, what I'd like to start with, perhaps for people who don't know you as well or aren't as familiar with what astrology is. I know there was a video I saw recently, a professor from one of the universities in California who was talking about this. I actually didn't realize that Carl Jung brought a lot of his archetype work into this. We've got there's even some, there's some potential connections with my old world of quantum physics, because everything is connected and entangled. There's influences there. Explain astrology to someone.
Ooh, and it's such a vast subject, right? Because it's the universe, it's the heavens. It existed before we probably walked upright. We have all these planets, and we have certain. I work with 4 main asteroids, and there is an energy there where we are impacted, we are affected. It's something that is and I'm a real skeptic and somewhat of a cynic in many ways. Like it took me a long time to really accept that this was something I was going to sign on to. But the energies are just undeniable. As one of my students says, you can't make this stuff up. The synchronicity, that kind of web that connects us all. It's pretty amazing.
And I've just noticed while you're sharing that, there's a lot of viewers from this area, but I know that there's lots of people following you from all over. Yeah. I love what you said, that you are a cynic, because a lot of the people who react to it approach it in a cynical way. And like my background, I was a scientist, and I think I still am. And science doesn't mean you can prove everything. It means if you do A and you consistently get result B, you can probably link them. And to me, that's how I've applied this. Is this relevant information for my life?
Right. It's something that it's one of my disappointments with science or scientists that disprove astrology. I'll often ask them, how long have you been studying astrology? Because once you start studying astrology, there's really kind of no denying that it is something that impacts us. I come from a karmic point of view, that I believe each lifetime, we're here to do many different things. We're meant to undo many different things as well. But it's but one of my disappointments is that they don't look at it. Their metrics for proving or disproving it rather are don't apply to astrology. Quick example. if I have a Mars in my Mars in Capricorn, Mars is a planet that is the warrior god. It motivates us. It's our passion. It's what gets us up out of bed in the morning. But if it's a little neurotic, which that's not uncommon, I can have anger. I can have, my body can be impacted by it. But your Mars and my Mars are going to act differently because they're going to be aspected to different planets. There's no chart that is exactly the same as another chart. Your own chart, as I like to say, I feel like Bernie Sanders and his thing that he says all the time, that there's no chart. You can't duplicate your chart for 26,000 years. You are so you. And that to me is so sacred and so unique, and so incredibly, I think, empowering and humbling at the same time. That your chart with that exact month, day, year, time, location can't be duplicated ever again for 26,000 years.
Right. Even if you're a twin.
Yeah.
Because there's slight differences, right?
There's slight differences. I have identical twin sisters, and so twins has always been a little, fascination for me. It's fascinating that one difference I've seen with twins, just in that tiny bit of time difference in terms of birth, that typically it's the planet Saturn, which is Saturn rules karma and a bunch of other things, and usually that's just in a slightly different area of the chart that makes all the difference in the world.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now, since this pandemic has happened, what are the most frequent questions you've been getting?
I don't know if I'd say there's any specific questions that, are more usual or unusual than before. It's, that might be just my own clientele at the moment. That could change next week. I certainly look to see if there's any caution I need to communicate to them. And I haven't seen anybody that, they're going to get COVID, but just, okay, this is a cautionary period, be mindful about that. So no question that's more unusual. Certainly certain work things, and this energy is impacting everything. It's overwhelming, no question. It creates a lot of uncertainty, and that's to be expected with this kind of a seismic shift. If I can just kind of go into some of the energies that are occurring around the pandemic.
Yes, please.
Okay, is that astrologers have known for a long time that during the period between 2008 and 2024, there'd be a seismic shift in terms of, world order, social order, governments, business, corporations, all the rest of it. And that this particular energy, Pluto, is the great exposer. It exposes and it just kind of rips things, the cover off, and this is what you're dealing with. And it hasn't been around since the American French revolutions. It plays a very special role in the U.S. right now, and as it does every country, but the U.S. in particular. And it's something that, so all the systems that were born at the ashes of those times are no longer sustainable. They're no longer good for us, no longer good for the earth. And so they have to be dismantled. And that wasn't going to happen on a voluntary basis. We've had some golden times, and so we're not going to just kind of voluntarily, okay, we're going to, kind of burn up the barn to see the moon. But it's something that is, so here we are. And it would be, the planet Pluto rules terrorism. It also rules pandemics. This is the big year in terms of this whole cycle between 2008, 2024. This is the hardest year. So if that's any kind of comfort for people during this particular cycle, this is our toughest year.
Okay. So, and also, there's a lot of other things that are pretty significant that are happening this year, right? That we've had conversations about that.
Yeah, certainly the planet Saturn is playing a big role. Right now, it's currently in Aquarius. It's going to slip back to Capricorn July 1st. And Saturn is where our karmic obligation is. It is, and right now in Aquarius, we have a karmic obligation to humanity. We have to protect each other. We look at the masks, for example. Somebody is saying, oh, they're fear-based and they're care-based. They're not fear-based, they're care-based. I care about you, so I'm going to protect you from some kind of potential virus I may have. So they're care-based, not fear-based. And and that's an incredibly important distinction, to that this is about kind of mutual care, not feeding each other's fears. So that's one energy. It goes back into Capricorn until December 17th, and then it pulls back into Aquarius till March 2023. So our continued obligation to humanity, it's going to become very clear that we are each other's brother's keeper, for example. It's going to become really clear.
And also, we were chatting about this in the last week, that right now we're moving into a stage in the next week or so where a lot of planets are going retrograde for the summer.
Venus is going retrograde next week, and I wanted to wait till after the full moon to break that to people. It's not a big deal as such. It certainly is going to, any relationships that are rocky, it's certainly going to further deteriorate the relationship status of people. It's certainly not a time to, buy into, any kind of big items, although I doubt if people are really, into that. It's, so that's one piece in there. The Mars retrograde is a whole other story, and I'll get to that in a moment. But Venus retrograde is also, it's, I don't see it as a negative thing per se. If a relationship is meant to, people are meant to go their own way, they're meant to go their own way, and this will, speed it up. But it's, it's something that is, it also can bring back different art projects. It's retrogrades bring back from the past. So we could hear from lovers from the past, for example, but we could, find a piece of writing we did a number of years ago and say, oh, maybe now's the time to launch this, a painting. So it's a time to kind of go back and, what kind of artistic, connection can I now kind of blow the dust off and present. So it's not, I don't see it as an all bad thing. It's a time to review our heart, which is good. It's a time to review, okay, what is it that our heart wants? So that's part of the Venus retrograde. Mercury goes retrograde in June. And, that's a, tough time in terms of communications in general, but Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. One of the big kind of entries that's coming in here is the North Node Gemini, South Node Sagittarius. And it's, if I can explain those briefly, the North Node is what we're to cultivate. We're kind of walking new ground. The South Node, we have a lot of talent and skill, but it's also neurotic. It can be our default. And certainly a lot of people during this time are falling into their default. And I'd like to find some space to talk about that a little bit. And so moving forward, it's going to be around for about 18 months. Ideally, the North Node Gemini, we create new communities. It appeals more to the logos, to the mind, to the logic. It's curious, but it's curious without bias. And a lot of people, we all have unconscious bias. That's simply true. But this is more, again, logic-based. It is curiosity. It's about developing and growing kind of unique communities based on a lot of changing values. And that's another piece that's here as well, is changing values. The South Node, we can become quite nationalistic, different biases, different prejudice, bigotry, I find that's the basis of a number of different things that are going on anyways. So that's another entry.
Okay, but also there's soon Saturn and Jupiter, right? I believe are going retrograde also.
Right, they're going retrograde is what. Yes, that's right. They're going retrograde. It's and retrogrades do give us an opportunity for redos. Right. Kind of to do more of an inner. Jupiter retrograde is a little difficult, and it's going to connect with Pluto again June 30th. That's I think one of the last pass. There will be one more pass this year, and that's a very unique energy. I was born with that combination, but the Jupiter retrograde can be a little bit tough during this time. Yeah, go ahead.
So I take it that, tell me if I'm on track here, that these are influences, right? There's no absolutes. It's sort of like, are you going to swim with the tide or against it? So what this means, that this is a summer to perhaps reflect, consolidate all the things that we've done, which is actually right now when we're in lockdown, it's perfect. It's ideal in what I'm sensing. Am I on track with that?
You're on track with that. It depends on, those transiting planets, the ones that, Jupiter goes retrograde once a year, Saturn does, they all do for anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So it's a usual movement that they do. But this year is certainly a unique year. How they interface in our own chart, we go back to that. As I like to tell my students, nothing happens without the permission of your birth chart. So how I respond to it could be very different from how you respond to it, based on my own kind of wiring in there, my unique once in 26,000 year wiring. So that's another part of it. Another energy that is incredibly important is, the planet Uranus moved into Taurus March of 2019, fully moved in March of 2019, and it's around. I'll have to look up the date when it's around, and that is, again, that uncertainty. I knew that it hasn't been around since the 1930s. And that's been talked about more lately. And I've been chirping about this, like a hungry little bird for a few years, and feel like talking to air in a way. And so here we are. It's, and Uranus can, certainly give a lot of, anxiety, uncertainty. It's that uncertainty because Uranus is shifting things without our permission. We didn't ask for Uranus to come into Taurus. It's but it's brilliant. It is innovative. It is what creates kind of our future, different social order. It does contribute to different social orders. It breaks us free of things that no longer work for us. It's the grand liberator, the grand awakener, and so it wakes us up to, in Taurus, the values. What are our values? And I don't feel much has changed in my life, but I'm open to, a big shift of values there in terms of what is really important. I'll get to the money piece maybe a little later, because that's obviously important. But it's but there's this big shift of values in terms of what is really important in my life. I've heard stories from my clients around that. One person is very, very urban, New York, and she's now like, okay, we're going to go into the country. They have that option to do that. So they're looking for a more simple life without all the noise. So, yeah.
So what are some of the influences, some of the tides that we may be aware of that's happening right now?
What do you mean?
Well, things, closer to what's happening around now. Like we just came through the full moon, which certainly was interesting. There's some interesting things flared up with that we've chatted about.
Oh, yes. Well, right now, I sent you a chart if you want to put that up.
Okay.
It's, there we are. That's exactly now. Well, the moon might have shifted degree, but everything else would pretty well stay the same for the rest of the day. The moon is the fastest moving body, and it goes through each sign, spending about 2.25, 2.5 days in each sign, and it brings up different emotions. It's now in a waning cycle, which, on one hand, we can kind of de-escalate a little bit. And where it is today, it's in Sagittarius, which is very purpose. It's very purpose-driven, mission-driven, quest-driven. So we can kind of examine, self-reflect, what is my purpose moving forward? And we each have a role to play in moving forward. That I talked about briefly in terms of generational influences, but we each have a role to play. So what is my purpose moving forward? So we can kind of explore that and examine that. Mercury is in Taurus, which is the, kind of, it can be a little bit too firm, we can say, that kind of entrenched, divisive energy that is so in vogue, which is not, not where we're going. This is about showing up to care and developing compassion for our fellow human and being open and spacious. But it, and what else is there? Mars is finishing up its round in Aquarius, which when it moved in, I knew this would happen, and, upsetting too, where, it's natural. People that are born with this Mars, they want a lot of freedom and space. If I had them as an employee, I'd let them do their own thing. They are totally not into micromanagement. They do better. Some of their genius can really come out if they're left to their own devices. But it wants freedom. And I knew that the Mars rules anger. I knew there'd be a lot of anger about so-called freedoms being curtailed. That is going to be shifting next week as well. into Pisces. So that's another influence. Unfortunately, today and tomorrow it is hitting the U.S. moon. So I do expect some stuff going on in the U.S. the next couple of days.
Okay. And
okay.
we have someone is saying here, the time has given me the opportunity to stop and reflect on what's really important in my life. And thank you for sharing. I mean, that's one of the things that I think I've spoken a lot about, is that I think before the pandemic, our society had a virus of busyness, that everyone was, I think you talk about purpose with where the moon is right now. I think a lot of people did not have that clarity of, what gives meaning to them. So they busied themselves with work, with family, with friends, with community, so that you didn't have to be still. And one of the things that's happened here is we've, basically had the rug pulled out from under us, and some are working, some are homeschooling, but still there's a lot more time where you are just you to reflect.
And some people are super uncomfortable with that. And I've had some clients that are truly embracing the stillness, and stillness is a door or a step towards kind of enlightenment, if you like. We need that stillness, and yet we've busied and cluttered up our life in a huge way, no question about that. And busy became kind of a religion within itself. It's and it was completely neurotic. There's no question, it was neurotic.
And let's just touch on, you and I've had some conversations. It's, you talk about, can this be proven? You talk to any ER nurse, you talk to any cop, and they will tell you things go wackadoodle on a full moon, right? And
well, actually, the moon prior to that, and called the waxing quarter moon, and typically that's more of a crisis point than the full moon. Full moon just brings everything to light, and that happens, I'd have to check, but maybe about a week before the full moon. And it's interesting because the moon, as tells a story. From new moon to full moon, it tells a story. And the new moon, we kind of start, we're all shiny and new, kind of innocent. It is reflective of the Fool in the tarot deck. I'm kind of like walking along, whoops, there's a cliff, I don't see it. The quarter moon brings up the fall off the cliff. So we, have the new idea. The crescent moon, we're acting, we're being social, we're sharing it maybe, we're doing things with it. It's a doing moon. And then we come to the quarter moon, it's like we meet our first opposition, and then for a lot of people, if people are feeling very fragile, then certainly the quarter moon can be a time of a long quarter moon and the full moon both are I have talked to a lot of police about this, and ER people or emergency people about this.
And we saw a spike literally around that time in the conspiracy theories going around, and I was just wondering your thoughts on that, because to me that's a lot of fear-based stuff and coming from a sort of a victim place. What's your take on that? Right.
It's very, very fear-based. It's hard because, for years, and you can track this astrologically, we've lost, this is kind of a pandemic too of mistrust and untruths. There's no question about that, it is. But for years, and again, you can track that astrologically, our trust in authority has waned. It's healthy to question authority, government, corporations. We know that there's been a lot of wrongdoing, evil doing, certainly in governments and corporations. That's simply a fact. All of that is going to be exposed with this particular Pluto in Capricorn energy that's there till 2024. So questioning authority in terms of, say, government, corporations, and so forth, and all our systems is a really healthy thing, and I think it's incumbent on each of us to do that. However, the conspiracy theories have really kind of come in here at a time of all this uncertainty, this fragility, because we're all fragile, we're all in a state of becoming, and we don't know what that person or the world is going to be moving forward yet, but it represents a huge opportunity for us personally and globally and collectively, and socially. But it's so they have, you know, kind of come in there. It is very fear-based. It is it's also kind of Pluto directed as well, you know, so it's and if something is Pluto directed, it can really pull us in. It's a very what's the word I'm looking for? It's not an addiction, it's deeper than that. It is you know, obsessive. It's very, very dark. It's incredibly dark. And it's, yeah, I feel it's certainly adding to a lot of mental fragility for sure. So yeah, it's unfortunately, it's you know, going to be around, and I do feel it may even contribute to the length of this pandemic.
That's sad.
Yeah.
That. Now,
Yeah.
this is interesting. Marilyn is asking if you could touch on the negative energy that's been happening in the province of Nova Scotia, because not only the pandemic, but we had the mass shooting, and then there's the helicopter crash, which had a lot of people, the Canadian Force helicopter crash, and then just recently the little boy.
Boy, it's very interesting. It goes right back to that weekend of the unbelievable you know, shooting. It's really unbelievable. It goes back to that weekend. It was a weird energy, almost like a portal had been ripped open. The helicopters connected little boy, but it's yeah, we've been in a really tough time. I don't believe that we're really out of that until August of this year, Nova Scotia. So it will pass. It's something that it does link into some Gemini energy, which is about community and how important it is to share and care in community. You know, we've been like that in Nova Scotia anyways, but this really, you know, brings it to our hearts that, okay, we have to really be looking out for each other, caring for each other. And, you know, this is such an incredible time in terms of really stepping up with our support for other people. You know, it's really incredible. I've been stepping up support in terms of donations and so forth. I think if anyone can do that, it's a good idea. Whatever you can do to offer support for other people is really, you know, this is the time to do it. No question about that. But it's, yeah, hopefully, but I feel that there probably will be maybe a couple more tragedies in Nova Scotia.
But you're right in that this is something that, even though we're challenged with the physical distancing, there's so many different ways that people are connecting, and people from around the world connecting with us that we're finding.
Absolutely. And so ingenious, some of the things that have been, and so generous, you know, the artists and musicians in Nova Scotia, for example, all over the world, but, you know, just there's a lot of creativity happening too, and a tremendous amount of creativity, but it's so generous and so, you know, inspiring what they've been able to offer in terms of, say, music and art and so forth. So, but it absolutely is a time to link that, you know, come together in care rather than fear. You know, what's going to be exposed with systems and government will be exposed. You know, there's no question about that. It's going to be, all of that will be revealed in its own time. With a Pluto energy, we kind of get out of the way. You don't want to get in the way of Pluto anyways, but you kind of get out of the way and allow. So, yeah. Okay.
So one of the things that we said, that even with all this going on, one of the things we wrote in the write-up for this is that that there is a case, a cause to be realistically optimistic.
Yes.
Can you share a bit about that, about how we can tap into that?
Some of it is what we've already shared about, you know, the community and so forth, that really, you know, coming together and caring and supporting. And it's Pluto, going back to Pluto, I'm not Pluto obsessed. That would be anybody that studied astrology would now be laughing at home. Pluto obsessed is an oxymoron, but it's on one hand, for each of us, it's uprooting, you know, what we haven't healed, right? It's uprooting and showing what we haven't healed, any kind of traumas and wounds. And, you know, that's a very difficult, very difficult, but it is asking us to get rid of that to move forward. Like, we have an opportunity to recreate. This is golden, golden, golden. And we've got brains, we've got people, that are, rather than, being obsessed and going down this rabbit hole and that rabbit hole, a lot of them are incredibly bright people and creative people. We have an opportunity to recreate now a whole new world. We're not going to kind of really see what that new world looks like till after post 2024. But we are, we have an opportunity to recreate a whole new world based on a more egalitarian way of looking at things, more compassionate. That's our big opportunity right now. It would not have happened without this. And this is, heartbreaking for many, many people. There's no question about that. But it wouldn't have happened without this big pause, this big kind of stop. It wouldn't have happened because we would have just been in our busy worlds doing this and doing that. Right. So one of the big takeaways is, this will end. It's going to change. It's changing the world, no question. It's changing our lives. But this is an opportunity to recreate. It's, again, that samurai poet, 17th century Japanese guy, who said, "I burned down my barn and now I can see the moon." So.
Yeah, what you say is so true, that we could have changed our lives, our organizations long ago, but we like to hold on to the, people call it the comfort zone. It's usually not comfortable. It's just familiar, and we hold on to the familiar. And I've found that with individuals that I work with, that can coach, and organizations that I do strategy with. Usually the real change happen when they've had crazy disruption in their lives and it's been thrown out, and they have to reinvent, and they do brilliant, amazing things where the real passion comes out. They could have done that 3 months before, but they're not open to it because they're too scared. But once they get sort of knocked down at the knees, then the disruption has happened. It opens that door to amazing things to emerge.
And that's a great point and a great illustration of the planet Uranus, because Uranus is the disruptor. It is. We have no big pre-warning on Uranus. It comes in and disrupts. And the other side of Uranus is genius. It is about liberating you from habitual patterns. But all of us cling on to our habitual patterns because we think they work, and they don't. But we think they work, and they are kind of a comfort, but they're absolutely hold us back from all kinds of things. And Uranus is the planet that takes us forward in a way in terms of innovation. So yeah, absolutely, it is the disruptor, but we don't change that willingly. We don't. It takes that energy.
Yeah. And a lot of times I don't know that it is really that comfortable. I mean, I've worked with coaching clients that fight irrationally to stay in toxic situations because it's what they know. I
have done that many times. It's kind of, I'm an Aquarius, and which is ruled by the planet Uranus. And sometimes I feel that's one of my big roles, is to simply shift people from one way of being to who I see them being, what their kind of soul's calling is, what their evolutionary path is really asking of them. So that's one of my things. But yeah, I know people will hang on.
Right. So are there any other key things that you'd like to share with people right now in terms of what they can focus on? And to me, it's like, how can you ride with the waves to move forward in the best way, right? Any other thoughts on things that people can be aware of in the days and months to come?
Well, allowing the uprooting to happen, and that's, again, a little bit definitely uncomfortable. Just allowing this dismantling, just allowing the energy, any big intense emotions and feelings that come in. Obviously, reach out. It is very challenging for people that are struggling with mental health issues, and it's so reach out to some good resource. There is sitting in the stillness, knowing that it's a doorway or a portal to, our evolutionary path, our genuine, authentic evolutionary path. And it's, it's something that we'll all get through this. We'll get through it much better together. And I was an observer witness years ago with a situation that it involved a number of people coming together. All of them had sizable egos, and they dropped their egos to unite for this particular fundraiser. And it was unbelievable how how quick they were able to get together this really complex event, and they raised bucket loads of money, and it was because they came together. It's because they united. They dropped everything else and they came together. And it was almost like a miraculous thing watching it happen. It was really amazing, really amazing. Yeah.
We have Kathy Jones coming in with worrying about that there's no future, worry about creatures and humans. Can life survive this? Can health return to the earth? Or are we just going to get used to dressing like Martians and using miniature robots to pollinate and having poems written about fridges and computers instead of news and birds? Thank you, Kathy. I love the way that you express, but I think it's concerned a lot of people, the worries that a lot of people are carrying.
Absolutely. And there is a future moving forward, no question. This is our toughest year. This is, I think Richard Tarnish used the word crucible. That's a good word. It is a crucible, and trying to prepare it or trying to settle into that energy is not an easy ask. It's a big ask, but there is a future. It's nature is returning to us. We're the air, even though Halifax is not a really big polluted place, the air does smell better here. It's we're seeing more wild animals here. It's so there's absolutely a future, no question. And creativity really thrives in these times. It really does. You can look back in history and see that these amazing creative works, amazing scientific discoveries. It's who was it that discovered gravity in a pandemic back in the 16th century?
Was that Newton? I think was that during a pandemic?
Yeah.
Oh.
And he was under quarantine. So what do you do when you're under? And again, you don't have to learn a new language or any of those things that they were some people were suggesting early on. Just be and know that there is absolutely a future, and you have a role to play with it. That might be a good segue to talk about the Pluto generations.
Sure.
Okay. It's Pluto is a generational planet. It's also a personal planet, and it says many things in your own chart that speak about what you're to, uproot, and also what transformational energy that you're carrying, that you're meant to share with the world, share with your world. It could be 3 people, it could be 3 million people, and it's so. Pluto was in the sign Cancer during, my parents' generation. So people that are born up to 1939, they can, kind of help us, transform how we see family. It's just seeing the message here. So what is family? What do we need for our kind of basic security? That generation was mind-blowing in terms of what they were able to do with, how they were able to kind of make it through, say, the Second World War and the Depression. Then 1930, then Pluto moved into Leo, and was basically not fully in Leo to 58. It moved in 56, moved out 58. So what we can do, people that are born in the Pluto and Leo generation, we can show people how to live with dignity. Play, fun, children. How can we, what kind of transformative energy can this generation bring in that helps people see, the importance of dignity, human dignity, and being present, showing up. The next generation, Pluto and Virgo, that moved in, it ended in 1972, actually. And it's something that is, so 58 to 72, it was fully in Virgo. And that generation, they were meant to go through kind of huge transformative things around work and work function. And certainly that generation is more the, computer and all of this kind of thing. But they can show us how we could transform work and service to other people. What is my service to you? What is my service to my neighbor? Sacred service. And it's and work function. How can I transform my workspace? What does that mean moving forward? They can help with that. They have that coding. Pluto is kind of this concentrated energy of transformation, and that we all have access to it. If we kind of be still, we can have access to it. The next generation, 72 to 1984, they have Pluto in Libra. So they can show us how to collaborate, how to cooperate. which is a big deal. How can we negotiate? How can we? What are some of the laws? What are some of the more humane laws that we can put in now that we're in this space? Or not quite in this space. We are in a state of becoming. What can we do to moving forward with the changing values and so forth? What would be more equitable laws moving forward? And so they can help with that. And then the next generation, which is one of my favorite generations, 1984 to 1995, they have the power to either kind of vacate the building or, be able to really help with this transformative energy that we're all living under. What does that mean? And how can I really use this and leverage this? It's an intense energy. It's the most intense area for Pluto to be in. So they came knowing how to transform. They came with this knowing. I've had some of them as students, and some of them are like prodigies. They're it's amazing. The next generation, Pluto in Sagittarius, they were born from 95 to 2008. They can again show us kind of the bigger picture. They're born this idea of mission. And certainly in terms of like religious, religion path forward, they can help us. They'll be the ones that'll usher in some other type of spiritual path, no doubt. But how can we, kind of see as a global community our mission, our purpose moving forward? So those are some of the generations. The generations born 2008 up to 2024, they're the builders. They'll help us. They'll help us integrate all these transformative, experiences and ways of being into the next post 2024 and on. So that's a little bit of the Pluto generation.
And I love the way that you're looking at what everyone is bringing to the game instead of the challenges. Because I think we need to look at that.
We completely need to look at that, and we all have that energy somewhere. Each one of us can bring something to the game that helps in this transformative cycle that we're in right now, because we're all in it. We're not getting out of it. We have to kind of move forward with it. And there is a forward, there is a future. No question about that. But all of us have something. It may sound little, the Pluto and Leo show dignity, but human dignity is incredibly important. Our children are important. Like, what can we bring to the table for our children? And play is important. And that may sound really ridiculous in these times, but play is incredibly important. Creativity is very much a Pluto and Leo game too. So, all those things are incredibly important. Each one of them are.
So Sue's curious what global transformation you see Pluto initiating when it moves into Aquarius.
Again, it may sound all, daisies and butterflies, but between when Pluto moves into Aquarius in 2024, and it'll be there till 2044, we will be moving towards a more egalitarian society. I'm convinced of that. But we have, we're in a rough road moving forward. No question about that. It will be definitely more about, and it was the original, I guess, promise of the last time Pluto was in Capricorn was that promise with the American French revolutions that people would be, have more freedom, right? Individual rights, it's self-actualization, the right to freedoms, certain freedoms. And that was the promise of that time when the last time Pluto was in Capricorn. We've mucked it up. We've royally mucked it up. So when Pluto moves into Aquarius during this time between now and 2024, all of that is being shed and discarded and all the rest of it. But then we move into that period again where, okay, it's about individual rights, all human rights, not just certain races, not just certain countries, but the whole world. Yeah.
And Sue says daisies and butterflies works for her. I love it. Love it. So anything else you'd like to touch on before we start to wrap things up then, Deborah?
There'll probably be a lot that'll come to me after, of course. It's one thing about this virus, it will go away. I do feel there'll be a vaccine really in incredible short period of time, given how vaccines are typically rolled out. We will be wearing masks for the next, till 2023. Certain stores, all airlines will be requiring them. So those things will remain in place. It's interesting because astrology is not separate from everyday objects. When masks became a thing, I had to, what rules masks? And it's ruled by Saturn and Neptune. So, and it makes sense. Neptune is, kind of disguise, and Saturn is boundaries. And it's, so I need a boundary with you, kind of thing. It's a care thing, not a fear thing, as I said at the beginning. So Saturn is in Aquarius till March 2023, so we'll need a boundary with each other in human. But Neptune is an energy that has a relationship to viruses, and in large part, even though, like, to develop a vaccine, you have to know, what the disease is. I feel that to be able to develop, and this is going to sound a little weird, but I feel the vaccine will be out there. But with Neptune in Pisces, there'll still be parts of the virus that'll be mysterious, And again, that leaves, that fear and uncertainty, like, where is it coming from, kind of thing. I'm not at all fearful of the virus, not whatsoever. But I feel a responsibility, a deep responsibility. I feel, each of us were born for this time. We were, and it's it's this call to arms, but I have no fear about getting it. I don't want people that I love or people I care about in general or anybody to get it. But there'll be some mysterious elements that will remain with this virus. And that sounds kind of counter to them developing a vaccine, is my point.
Okay. Yeah. Now, in terms of, we're getting lots of people appreciating that the input that you're bringing in. So in terms of connecting with you, I know that you can find you Deborah Young Astrology on Facebook. You do wonderful posts, and then your webpage I'm putting up here. Any other thoughts about where, if people want to connect with you?
Well, it is people can have virtual appointments, I think, as early as August. I do workshops. They do fill up pretty quickly, and I haven't had the time to, there's one I hope to put on soon, which will be, of course, virtual. But workshops are a good way for people to get in contact with me as well.
Oh, here's a interesting one. You are cool with mandatory vaccinations for the permission to travel.
Actually, that's a tough one, but yeah, I think I would be, honestly. Yeah.
Because to me, that comes back to what you said, it's care for others, right?
Yeah, it is care for others. It's hard. I understand why people don't want vaccines. I totally get it. It's what if I could get away with not having one, I probably wouldn't get one. I wouldn't. Why put something else in my body? But I think I always remember my mom. She had a really tough go. Young widowed mother and so forth. And she was always so grateful that the polio vaccine came out. Like she was somebody that always remembered to be grateful anyways. But she was so grateful that the polio vaccine, that gratitude was one less thing she had to worry about, that one of us wouldn't get polio. She was so grateful for that. And, with this, I'm afraid as far as travel goes, if you want to travel, you have to travel. Yeah, I can see there being a mandatory vaccine. I don't feel that's going to come up soon. I believe that the vaccine will come out, and, the airlines will be there'll be airlines that'll fail during this time. Aquarius rules airlines. Saturn can shut things down. So there will be airlines that will, file for bankruptcy, no question. And certainly air travel is absolutely changing while Saturn is in Aquarius. So I don't feel as though the airlines will necessarily come to the table soon with that mandatory vaccine. Because they are going to want the customers. They're in bad shape, and they will probably remain in bad shape for the next 3 years. So they may not come to the table soon with that. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in here. Truly appreciate it. I just want to mention again, if you want to find a place that gives you a sort of a breathing space from a lot of the anxiety out there that have created this group Community on Facebook. You can just find it, and it's about finding resources like this that nourish you and such. And the other thing I wanted to mention is it's really interesting that what you were saying about the moon right now bringing clarity to purpose and mission, because and I just want to mention one thing that I'm doing in a little over an hour is I suddenly had an awakening yesterday that I do a lot of work for people trying to move forward, particularly business owners and such, but there's something I went through as a child that is all of what we're dealing with here, the uncertainty, the anxiety, the not having control, not knowing, and suddenly realized that all that I learned in healing that is completely relevant to this. So I'm actually doing another Facebook Live at 1 o'clock on the SOULgineer page. So
and that is exactly we're we all of us, I feel almost I don't know what the word would be right now, but we're really all in this together, that all of our life experiences has led us to now. Mm-hmm. And that trust in that all your life experiences have led to now is such a key point for people to really, really know.
Yeah, and I absolutely see that. Everything from doing quantum physics to Reiki, it actually all for me sounds bizarre, but it all connects, even to my dance.
Right. Oh, absolutely. All of that is important. Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, suddenly realizing the resources that we have to bring forward. Yeah. I think I'm excited about that part of this time.
Yeah. I am too.
So thank you again, Deborah. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.